everyone, and welcome to another riveting episode of You Can't Spell Horror Without HR. HR, human resources, that's right. You cannot spell horror without HR. That's actually literally true and figuratively true for us here in the HR world. I'm your host, Chris Timol, and I am joined by the one and only Grimes, not Elon's wife, Brianna Grimes, PHR MBA, new to our tech team here at Puzzle HR. Grimes, say hello. How are you?
Hello, everyone. Super excited to be here. I get that a lot, actually, with the Elon Musk thing. It's his ex-wife now, though. I've been corrected. So
I did not know that. You know what? You learn something new every day, and I appreciate you for teaching me that. So happy to be here with you.
Excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me back.
Happy, always. Now, what we do is, or what I do is, I spend time on the X and the Reddit and where else do I go? Yeah, X and Reddit and Facebook and other places on the interwebs, and I seek out what I consider HR horror stories, things that happen in the human resources field that are just kind of crappy, and storify them. And we come to bring them here onto this podcast, and we tell you the story, and we talk about it. I mean, it should be entertaining and educational all at the same time. So that's what we're doing here. And this is a good one. We're going to title this one "The Good Old Boy Dilemma." This is a doozy. The good old boy dilemma. With this one, we delve into a story that uncovers the often complex and intertwined relationships in the workplace and the difficult choices that our HR professionals have to make. Now, this doozy began when a CEO leading a company with a big old call center of 50 employees reached out to an HR firm for support. But as the layers of his request unfolded, so did the complexities of his relationship with the call center manager, who is the man at the center of this controversy. This call center manager, it's a call center, right? So there's a whole bunch of people in a room making calls, answering phones and whatnot. But he's known for his kind of raunchy, off-color comments, and he had created an environment that really created potential for we'll just call it discomfort, especially for one employee who kind of stood up. She documented her complaints, but despite that, the CEO included one of the co-CEOs, included the one that reached out, shrugged them off, shrugged the claims off. I think this came from their deep-seated loyalty to the manager. The manager wasn't just an employee, right? That call center manager wasn't just an employee, but he was a good old boy, a friend that had been with them through thick and thin, and with the organization for a long time. So as an HR professional, the HR professional raised a bunch of questions to the CPO. To the CEO.
Got Star Wars on the brain. C3PO.
Yeah, the next one's going to be about AI, right? When the robots follow us around. But
there we go.
But so ask a question to CEOs like, was the manager ever disciplined? Would you ever write the manager up? And his response was just dismissive, underscoring really a reluctance to acknowledge the gravity of the situation. To him, the manager's actions were trivial and really unworthy of formal reprimand. Formal reprimand. It was clear, to the HR pro that the CEO is just not seeking a solution to foster a healthy, safe workplace. Instead, his requests for, I'm doing air quotes if you can't see me, sensitivity training, seemed like he just wanted to check a box, just put up like a formality, right? Like a shield in his mind against potential legal repercussions, rather than, a step towards genuine change. Right. And we see that a lot. Right.
Yeah.
So the HR person warned the CEO, of the serious implications of inaction. I mean, the path he was treading on obviously was not just, we'll call it ethically questionable, but legally precarious, right? We got to highlight the risk. I mean, think about it. Like this to me has got class action lawsuit written all over it. You've got a call center with like 50 plus employees. One person comes up and says something one time, and gets batted down, comes up again, with the exact same issues, this time in writing, right? All that documentation.
Yeah.
Right. If there's one person, there are three people. So a class action lawsuit was definitely a potential outcome, if this continuous negligence towards these serious employee, like if this continued, to me, that's where this seemed to me to be going.
Yeah.
So despite all those warnings, the CEO's stance remained unshaken. He was unwaveringly loyal to the manager, and really, you add that to just a blatant disregard for the well-being of his employees. You know, that the HR person could not, in good conscience, take on this engagement and do the sensitivity training. There's to me, to the HR person, there's three key HR principles: ethical responsibility. Our duty extends beyond employers to employees and the broader ethical standards of our profession. Advocacy for real change. True HR support means advocating for meaningful improvements in the workplace culture, keeping people out of trouble, and then risk management, legal compliance. It's crucial to recognize and act upon legal risks. A class action lawsuit can shut you down. So, I mean, this is to me, this is kind of more, Brianna, than just the story. Like, it's a testament to, what we deal with as HR professionals every single day. That dynamic in the workplace, is can be tenuous, right? I think is the word. And to me, this story stands to me as like just a stark reminder of our responsibility of creating a safe, respectful, and legally compliant workplace environment. So, so this one to me was a doozy. It really hit home. I've seen this, personally, not here at Puzzle HR or with any of our clients, but I've seen it in the past. I've heard it in the past where, that I know you have too, right? I mean, where you've got just folks that, he didn't mean anything by it, right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think I love that you titled this the good old boy, kind of scenario that we're talking through, because I feel like that it is so prevalent today. But when I started my HR career, 13 years ago, looking back now, hindsight being 2020, that was most of the scenarios that I dealt with some of my bosses in the smaller mom and pop companies that I had to start my career in, and I studied HR, and there's so many things that they can teach you in a book, but until you actually come across a situation like this, where you're confronted with, managers that have those loyalties, that inner circle, don't know how to treat people, or, have some sexist or misogynistic tendencies that people just are fine ignoring. It's nothing can really prepare you for that until you handle your first investigation, or you come face to face with, wow, I'm 3-4 years into my career and I'm going to sit down with a CEO of a company or a CFO of a company and tell them they can't do something. It's a surreal moment. And I think, it's part of reason why HR has a job and still has a place in business nowadays. But I think it's also contributed to why we've seen so much regulation from the government. I mean, look at how many states have increased their sexual harassment training and their definition of harassment, as well as, increased their statutes of limitations on harassment claims, because they knew this stuff was going on. And, some people in HR can be very effective, but when you're dealing with the owner of the company that could fire you, there's a lot of HR professionals that they have no power to make that change in the smaller organizations that don't have that governance or that board of trustees that they report to. So it's definitely an age-old, issue. It's something that I think every HR professional, you say good old boys, and they're just like, they've got a story, right? Something pops into their head, been there, done that, dealt with it, learned some things. But yeah, it is. It's definitely probably one of the core issues that HR professionals have been combating for over a decade.
Yeah. How, so you mentioned something. So you say, okay, so here I am, a young HR pro, right? You're got your master's, you're, 3-4 years out, in the field. And then you run into this situation where like it's black and white,
Yeah.
right? Like it's black and white. What needs to be done is black and white. There's like not even a question. It's, to me, it's very simple. That happens. You sit the person down, you document, you just to fire them on the spot, right? You
Yeah.
document, you discipline, you take corrective action, right? Investigate, document, discipline, take corrective action, and put things in place to ensure that it doesn't happen again. It's really, really simple. That doesn't mean that you and this person can't go have a beer. But I mean, like you're trying to protect the organization as well as your employees. But let's talk about that as an HR as an HR person. So how do you do that? Like, how do you make that? So it's got to be really difficult to kind of make that switch and say, okay, this has been your company for 30 years and I've been here for 30 hours. You're doing this wrong. I'm here to help you. Like, how do you deal with that?
Well, the one thing that I have learned is HR is all about relationships. Everything looks great on paper. We can document all of our SOPs until the cows come home, but until you add that human element to it, you don't really know how it's going to work, right? There are some people that are super responsive to feedback. They value HR in their organization. You have CEOs and CFOs that you tell them they're doing something wrong and they're just like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know. I understand the liability. Like, some people just operate because they don't know what they don't know. And, that knowledge and that education can sometimes build that relationship. You have other leaders that are super defensive. They, want to be the smartest people in the room. They think they know everything. They don't want anyone telling them how to run their business. Least of all, some young girl, 3-4 years out of college that thinks she knows everything from a book. And it can be a little bit of a challenge, but it comes down to, the relationship that you have with that person. And I think one of the hardest things that most HR people, have to do and what most business people do respond to is, when employees start to leave. And so, there are some jobs that I've been in, in my career where it got to a point where there was only so much I could change. And it was time for me to quit and go find a job where I was going to be valued and respected, because there's only so much that documentation will take you. And some business owners really don't respond until they start to see droves of employees quitting and it's affecting their business. And once it starts hitting them in the pocketbook, sometimes they'll take it a little bit more seriously. But yeah, it's definitely, as an HR professional, it's navigating personalities. Knowing the process is just half the battle. It really depends on the person and the leadership and what kind of level of support you have and what relationship you have with them at a professional capacity.
This podcast is brought to you by Puzzle HR. You've got the horror stories, we've got the resources to help. Learn more at puzzlehr.com/podcast. Now back to the show.
Let's take a step back to and talk a little bit about, because I know we're calling it the good old boy network, right? So, let me be inclusive, because it could certainly be the good old girl network too, right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
So, because it is, I've absolutely personally seen that in my X decades of years of a career, where whether good old boy, good old girl, we're those managers kind of create their clique, right? I guess you want to call it that, and like that's their crew that they run with. You ever run into a situation where it's innocent? Because a lot of times it's innocent. They just happen to get along and like one another. And so they enjoy each other's company. So they go out for dinner or drinks or what have you. And they're, they go out to lunch together, and so there's nothing nefarious or untoward about it.
Yeah.
Right. But But let's talk about the employee's perception, right? Like, so like that. So the other employees might perceive that as, favoritism or what have you, or
Right.
even a little thing that happens. So how do we deal with that? So I think that happens more. I think that happens more than something like this.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, it is something that is in common practice, and, it's human nature. I mean, we're going to gravitate towards people that, we jive with. We're not ever going to be everyone's cup of tea. That's, it's not a realistic expectation. But I feel like there's a group of, I think you can kind of categorize people into two large umbrella groups. You have, people that have naturally gifted high EQs. They're very well aware of their actions and how those actions affect people, and perceptions of others. And there's just people that are aware of that. And then there are other people that EQ is not their strong suit, and unfortunately, like all of our lives, if you think back to grade school, even high school, there were cliques in high school, and no teacher, no class ever taught us how to engage with people outside of our clique. The cliques are just kind of allowed to happen. At least when I was in high school, I don't know if that's changed ever too much, but the jocks hung out with the jocks, the cheerleaders hung out with the cheerleaders, the band and the theater kids hung out together. We had our people that we saw regularly, we hung out with, and we're never really forced to interact that much or do any type of team building things in high school. And when you go into the work world, you're kind of forced to interact with all sorts of people. And you're like, wow, I don't know how your brain works compared to my brain and how you perceive things versus me and what your life must be like. And really that EQ is what comes into play. And it's something that we're seeing businesses really take a lot more seriously and even offer trainings on it to their managers before they can become managers, because being aware of your surroundings and being aware of perceptions and making other people aware of those perceptions when they may not be aware of them, is really helping businesses build that culture of just awareness and, what it like a togetherness, more of a community feel where, yes, you can have your interests. Like y'all can have a book club, you can have a video game club, and game with people after work, or go to a beer and go dancing, after work. But during work hours, we all need to be on the same team, and we all, need to be given the same opportunities to succeed and the same opportunities for feedback. And so it's something that in the work world, some people, it's the first time they've ever been asked to interact in that capacity. So, it takes time, it takes training, but I think managers are best equipped when they have that awareness, or if EQ is not something that comes naturally to them, they're given that opportunity to train and understand, how perceptions differ from person to person, and to kind of factor in that human element.
Yeah. 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 That's so deep. So what, so I've so many questions. So how do you dismantle like a hostile work environment, like especially when upper management is part of the problem? How do you do that?
Yeah. Well, one thing I will say, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not going to be a one and done. I've had previous companies that I've worked for where there were hostile work environments that were happening in pockets. Sometimes it's a company-wide thing. Sometimes it might just be department specific. And so I think figuring that out first and foremost is really important. So doing things like an engagement survey across the company, or even something like stay interviews. It's something that we do and we recommend to our clients constantly, because stay interviews allows you to take a proactive approach to employee feedback. So you're not learning about the problems when employees are already fed up and quitting, and you're losing impeccable talent. Not only impeccable talent, knowledge of your business, especially smaller businesses that don't have the luxury of documenting all of their processes. And they do rely on, the people that act as the Jack and Jill of all trades in their company, and they wear multiple hats. When they take that knowledge with them, it can be devastating to a business owner, or even a department. And so one of the things is really to identify, is this a department problem? Is this a team problem? Or is this a company problem? And the only way you're going to do that is by gathering data. So engagement surveys, stay interviews are a great way to do that. If we've identified that there is a certain person that is kind of the heart of the issue, obviously doing a thorough investigation is always highly encouraged, to make sure that we encapsulate all of all of what's going on. Who's really enabled this person, or who has empowered this person to continue these behaviors? Has it ever been brought up before? Because there's really different ways to handle it depending on the situation. If this person it's never been brought up before, but HR has built a relationship with the employees where they now feel comfortable sharing, we're going to start from a completely different place than if this person has been complained about multiple times and it's management kind of shooting down those complaints, right? Those are like two completely different situations.
Right.
So it's really just gathering that information, gathering that data, and then making sure that you're addressing it accordingly, bringing it to that person's attention. Hey, saying, hey, these types of behaviors are not appropriate. Or, hey, when you go out and you hang out with these 3 employees consistently, it makes other people feel like they don't have the same opportunities. They don't have the same access to information. And so just bringing their awareness to it, and B, I think the most important thing about dismantling any type of hostile work environment is you have to have senior level manager commitment. If they are not willing to fire someone or take a zero tolerance stance to ensure that their culture is not negatively impacted by behaviors like this, it's going to be a really rocky road and you're going to be going uphill. And again, those are the types of leaders that they may not recognize there's a problem or care that there's a problem until it starts hitting their pocketbook. And you're going to see that in high turnover. You're going to see that in lower productivity, more employees going out on leave or calling out sick while they're looking for other jobs, all sorts of things that are kind of those red flags that something's wrong from a cultural perspective.
And in a work from home environment, getting one of those mouse jigglers, right?
Right. Yeah.
I actually saw one of those on spend any time on TikTok and you'll learn everything. We were just talking about goat farming before we started this. But yeah, I think that there's just so much of a culture now. It's interesting, right? Like you tell me what you think, right? So I kind of see this like the two, not cultures. I don't want to say generations, but you know what I mean. There are people who, whether they came into the workplace in the last 3 years or they're Gen Z or younger millennials, that are now used to having a lot more agency than they did pre-COVID, right? So work from home, work-life balance, all of that is just a lot more important forget about generation, to a set of employees, to many more employees today than pre-COVID, right? But then you have the C-suite, right? I'm in the C-suite, so I kind of get it, right? Why isn't everybody coming back to the office and wearing ties and dressing like they used to, and having deference for authority. So I kind of just see that just clashing is starting to happen.
Yeah.
And this story to me is a really good example of that, right? Where you had, the I don't want to call him elder, but you've got the CEO who's, and the co-CEOs really, who are just, I want things to be the way I want them to be.
Yeah.
And then you've got this, in this instance, a very, in my opinion, courageous young woman who stood up for herself and said, "Hey, this is not cool." And he said, "No, you're totally blowing it out of proportion. I don't know. I'll do sensitivity training."
Yeah, it's definitely, I feel like it's one of those things that we're all kind of saying the same thing, but we're speaking different languages. From a business owner perspective, they're focused on the business. From an HR perspective, we focus on the people and compliance and, aligning that and trying to make sure that it, matches up with the business owners. The funny thing about these types of situations, when you have, to your point on the changing landscape of the workplace, just in general, I think part of it is definitely attributed to just the generations and the access to technology that they have. But I think also a part of it too comes down to the things that we're allowed or not allowed, the things that we're capable of doing now are things that we weren't capable of doing in the 50s and 60s. The last time there was a huge work boom and a great economy, and people didn't take their work home. Work-life balance was a thing by pure design. I mean, they left the office, they went home, they spent time with their kids and families. Like, that was a no-brainer. No one was asking them to punch in, 10, 12-hour work days because, we didn't have email. We didn't have connectivity to our devices. No one could Zoom chat me at midnight in the 60s. So it's definitely one of those things
no one could Zoom chat you at midnight in the 2000s.
In the 80s.
The 2000s.
Yeah. I mean, they could page me, but the message was, a little shorter. So, not.
That's legitimate. Yes, they could call you. They could text you.
Yeah, but it's just, the landscape has just changed in general. And I find it comical, and this could be an unpopular opinion, but, businesses, we all know, I mean, this is business 101, businesses that don't adapt and change to the business economy fail, right? You've got a company like Amazon that started out selling books and helping college kids find affordable books and reselling their books. And now they sell freaking everything. I mean, everything, and they're one of the most highly rated or highly valued companies, in the United States. And then you've got other companies that just kind of didn't adapt and they went by the wayside. I mean, look at Kodak. Kodak film was going to be a thing forever. We've got digital cameras and digital, photographs we can take on our phones now. And Kodak is, not a household brand anymore. And it's interesting to me that that's such a common theme in business. Like, yeah, we have to change, we have to adapt. But when it comes to their workforce, they don't think that way. They still want to function like they're in the 60s, 70s, and 80s mentality of how we work as a workforce. And it's funny that they're so willing to adapt their product and their way they do business and expand globally with all of the technology that allows us to do so. But when it comes to their workforce, it's like, why would we change? And it's one of those things that the businesses that are adapting to the new workforce and what the new generations are motivated by when they come into the workforce, those are the companies that are going to struggle finding talent. They're going to struggle, finding people that are going to help them grow their business and help them continue to make a profit as the business environment changes. So it's just something that I always think about. I always find it very interesting when, I speak to business leaders that are so against workforce change, but I see them, doing a million versions of the same product to, speak to their buyers' needs. It's the same mentality. It's just, like I said, it feels like we're just speaking a different language, and being able to translate and bridge that gap between HR and business and why the two are so intersected and why there's such, a symbiotic relationship, I think is so important.
So first off, beautifully said. Second off, that's a whole other podcast.
Right? What a little bit of a tangent, but I love that you brought up the landscape change because it's really important, and I think it's also, it speaks to, the good old boy mindset is going away. I do feel that, in the past 5 years of my career, I've seen it a lot less. It doesn't tend to be one of the issues that, we run into from an employee relations standpoint. I think a lot of the employee relations issues that we run into now, to your point, are a lot more EQ based, a lot more favoritism. They're a lot more subtle. And sometimes it is just someone's feelings getting hurt or their perception being something different than what is reality, and having those sensitive conversations in a way that doesn't make that person feel attacked or isolated in any way. But again, it does kind of go hand in hand with the workplaces changing and how we handle our employees and the types of issues that we come across. They're changing. It's not the in your face, good old boy, this guy's, flirting with all the chicks and patting his secretary on the bottom, type of stereotype anymore. It's different. It's changing. And we have to be ever more aware of how it's changing so we can address them, and not sweep them under the rug just because they're not as serious as, the things that we dealt with 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Again, great. As always, Grimes, great conversation. I'll close it out with this. It doesn't have to be horrible, right? We can take these as learning moments, and I think if all of us as business leaders will just sit back and just really kind of think about the fact that we're not only responsible for our employees, we're responsible for our employees' families, right? So I think about us here at Puzzle HR today. I don't know if you know this, but we service I'll round up, right? Around 200,000 worksite employees, serviced by our our H Army out there in the world. Right now, by the way, so H Army is something I've been working on that for like ever. Try to get it doesn't write well. Like you can't put it in print well. It just looks HRMY. Like doesn't. You have to say it anyway. So 200,000 worksite employees serviced by our H Army out there, and I think of it as 200,000 families that we're servicing, because the work that we do is the work that every business should be doing, and that is to create, help our clients create and maintain a motivating environment where people want to do the work necessary to reach their individual potential, where they can, come and be seen, be their true selves, and be their best selves, for themselves and for their company. And, when the employer, takes that for granted and puts undue stress in the relationship, with those employees, well, it impacts their families. Like, they're going to come home and they're going to be stressed, and who knows what, she's going to say to her husband, or how he's going to treat his wife, or what the kids will see when dad or mom are just sulking on the couch, right? It has an impact. And so as business leaders, we've got a responsibility to take, to use HR, however, whatever you want to call it, right? HR, EQ, leadership, HR is so broad, but use that as a tool to make sure that you create and maintain an environment where your employees can feel safe and nurtured and welcome, and on and on and on. So
yeah, absolutely. Life is already hard enough. Work doesn't need to add to it.
Amen, sister. Well, all right. Well, so that's the episode. That's the episode, everyone. Grimes, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to chit chat with me on this.
Absolutely. This was great. Great conversation. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll be back sooner rather than later with another episode of You Can't Spell Horror Without HR.
You have been listening to You Can't Spell Horror Without HR podcast, brought to you by Puzzle HR, Human Resources Solved. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to our channel to stay notified of new exciting episodes. To learn more about Puzzle HR, visit us at puzzlehr.com/podcast. Thank you for listening.